Okay, so good morning. Today we begin the fifth parak, the fifth chapter of Masechet Nazir. And we have been talking about various instances of uh, um, mistakes or confusion about being a Nazir over the course of the month that we've been learning Masechet Nazir. And now we're going to really more formally deal with these errors, but we're going to do it by starting with what happens if one makes an error in the process of sanctifying an animal or sanctifying money for the Beit Hamikdash. So let's Tosfos. Actually, we can do the Tosfos even really before we get started, because now that I've told you what this Mishnah is about, we can learn the first Tosfos on the bottom of Lamed Bet, and that's where we're starting. The last line of Lamed Bet, right? It says Beit Shammai Omer Hektish Tos Havi Hektish. That if you make a mistake while making something hektish, so you are in fact, it is considered hektish. We're again bottom right hand side of the page on 30b. So as we will explain as we go forward. And why is this being brought here? After all, this is Maseches Nazir, not Maseches and Kodshim. So and because after this, we're going to be talking about what happens if one makes a mistake during in the process of becoming a Nazir. So Nakadhani Plutayu b'mechilton. So as a result, we talked about this in the course of our of our learning. And moreover, Mishum Plugta debate Shamu Beit Hillel. We will see an argument in the Mishnah that we will start with tomorrow, God willing. We'll see an argument between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel to besamach gabi misha nadar v'nisha l'chachamim. If somebody were to make a neder and then ask a rabbi to annul the neder. Again, this is going to be the Mishnah that we're going to start with tomorrow. So this is a good introduction for our parak, because essentially the parak has three topics, and we're going to talk about all three of them very briefly over the course of today. One is hektish b'tos, the second is nazir b'tos, and the third is this neder v'nishal situation. So we're going to see all three of those situations during the course of this parak, which is a very short parak. So in any event, when we had that situation, Amru lahem Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, listen. What is Beit Hillel says that in the situation where, let's say, I make a neder and to become a nazir, and then I set aside korbanot for the end of my nazirut, but then I go and ask a rabbi to annul my vow, and the rabbi says, yes, you in fact were sufficiently mistaken about the whole process. We're going to annul your vow. And so everybody seems to agree, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel agree, that this animal that I had sanctified is no longer sanctified and can go out and be with the rest of the flock. Well, we just read the words of Beit Shammai, that Beit Shammai says that if you try to make something hektish and you make a mistake during the course of it, it is considered hektish. So so Beit Hillel is saying, listen, you, Beit Shammai, are being on some level inconsistent, because you said before that if you try to make something hektish, you make a mistake, it becomes hektish. But here, the person was a Nazir, but he gets his Nazirut gets eliminated, and yet you say that the animal is not hektish, which we agree with. But you should agree with our position everywhere, that if you make a mistake in your process of making something hektish, it doesn't become hektish. So that's what Beit Hillel asked the Beit Shammai. So if you admit in the case that we are talking about right now, shehu hektish tos, that this is a mistaken hektish, and the animal can go out and graze among the flock, kolomar im kain, Hey, chomrim behektish tos the pligi alan. How come you're arguing in our first Mishnah? So we're going to have, again, the Mishnah that we're going to begin with tomorrow will deal with this machlokas. And so as a result, Tosfos is explaining that there are a few different reasons why all of this comes together. One is that we're going to be talking about Nazir Taos. And so as a result, let's talk about Hektish Taos as a preliminary. And during the course of the conversation, we are going to want to refer to the Beit Shammai's position in Hektish Taos. So let's see the Mishnah again, now incomplete, as we've had an introduction as to why we want to talk about this issue now. So Beit Shammai Omrim Hektish Taos Hektish, Beit Hillel Omrim Ein Hektish. That right. So clearly we have a very key machlokas that when Beit Shammai says that when you do something by accident, when you make a mistake, in the process of making something hektish, it does become hektish. But Beit Hillel says no, it does not. So Ketzad, what is the example? So Amar Shor Shachor Sheyetze Mibeiti Rishon Harehu Hektish. So the black ox that leaves which will be the first one to leave my house, it will be holy. Now, the key is, I should have said actually, which will, because if I say that will, then this is a very key difference in English, at least as I understand it, right? So the point is that am I saying that I'm referring to the first black animal that leaves the first black ox that leaves my house, or am I saying that the first animal out of my house will be black, and that one I will make hektish? So we're definitely understanding this is the latter, that the person says that the first animal out of my house will be black, and that animal I will make hektish. Now, what happens if the animal that comes out, the yatsa lavan, now a white one comes out? So it's a good question, right? What are we going to do? So Beit Shammai omrim hektish. Beit Shammai says it's hektish. Now, what is hektish in this particular case? Is it the white one that is hektish, or is it that if later a black one comes out, that one will be hektish? So that's going to be a machloket in our Gemara as to exactly how we should understand that. And that's the point that Tosfos makes at the top of Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph. So, and so we're going to see that there are going to be two different ways to understand this. Beit Hillel Omrim, Beit Hillel says no, Eino hektish. It is not kodesh. It does not have any sanctification. No animal becomes holy, because we are going to take you at your word. What did you make hektish? Only a black animal, and only if it comes out first. That is the requirement. If it doesn't meet both of those elements, so then you have made a mistake, and what you said is not true. And so as a result, there's not going to be any hektish. So what about similar situation? And we're going to have a progression here. The Rabbeinu Peretz notes that we're sort of increasing the level of difference, because really between a black ox and a white ox, one would expect that there would not be much of a difference in value. Although at the end of today, we will talk about the difference in value associated with white and black oxen. But in any event, now, second case of our Mishnah, dinar zahab sheya'aleh biyadi, right? A person says that the first sheya'aleh biyadi rishon, harehu hektish. A person says that the first coin, the gold dinar that comes out into my hand first, which is going to come out into my hand first, that will be hektish. And then what came out? Va'ala shel kesef. And what came out was a dinar of silver. And so as a result, the question is whether or not that silver coin or some coin becomes hektish. So again, Beit Shammai omrim hektish, or Beit Hillel omrim eino hektish. Beit Shammai says that it is hektish, and Beit Hillel says it's not. Chavis shel yayin. So then now case number 3 is now case number 2, like case number 1. We're talking about the same basic object, right? It's just a question of whether or not it's gold or silver, but really, and maybe there's a bigger difference in value, but fundamentally, we're talking about a coin, and fundamentally, we were talking about oxen. But now we have case number 3. If a person says that the first barrel that comes a barrel of wine which will be the first thing into my hand. So that will be hektish. But also shel shemen. And then what ended up coming out was a barrel of oil. So Beis Shammai omrim hektish, Beis Hillel omrim eino hektish. So again, Beis Shammai says that it's hektish, and again, we still will have this machlokes that we will see between Rav Papa and Abaye. Are we talking about the first item that comes out is hektish? That'll be the Abaye point of view, or are we talking about the first that we're talking about actually the first object of the type that I wanted when it comes out will be hektish? That's how Rav Papa understands. So okay, so now that we've dealt with that, so now
a question before you go on.
Absolutely, please go ahead.
The most famous erroneous consecration in Tanakh is Yiftach's daughter.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not exactly the same as the examples here, but according to Beit Hillel,
it's not the same in a very crucial manner, because he did not qualify. He did not qualify the object leaving his home. He said any object. That was the problem. The first thing out of his house. If he had the first ox, the first animal, that would have been fine. That he would have been okay. But the fact that he said the first thing out of his home, and of course the Gemara has, as I know you know this, numerous discussions about whether or not he could have undone the vow, what actually happened to the girl, etc. So there are a lot of things that thankfully are unclear that we can understand in a variety of different ways associated with it. But the key difference between that mistake and this mistake is that here there was an actual error. Meaning, obviously, that wasn't what he intended. But the problem is that we follow what comes out of a person's mouth. And so as a result, even Beit Hillel would agree in the situation of Yiftach. And so thank you so much for raising it. They would agree that that's a problematic situation. That's going to be a case of hektish potentially. So, given the fact that at least you can't say that it is a mistake of the type that we are talking about at this moment. So, an excellent point. Did you want to follow that up with something?
No, that's just it, because it's an obvious difference there.
Yeah.
But it was still an erroneous consecration. So if the Mishnah were only the first line,
Correct. Exactly. The key here is that we are seeing that, and as we saw throughout Maseches Nedarim, right, and even in the beginning of Maseches Nazir, as we saw with respect to somebody who tries to become a Nazir for a day, sometimes what you say has meaning, even if the intention is not your act, even if the intention of what your words actually have effect is not what you actually had in mind. Meaning, the person didn't want to become a Nazir for 30 days. He wanted to become a Nazir for one day. And presumably he wouldn't have wanted to become a Nazir at all if he ended up being forced to be a Nazir for 30 days. And yet we say he's a Nazir for 30 days. So, again, this is, I've said this before. I'm not sure that I've said it on the recording, but I truly believe that Maseches Nedarim should be a Masechet that high schoolers learn, because it's so important to learn at a young age that our words have meaning. Because so often we say things like, and Rabbi Weiss is very famous for highlighting this point, that we say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But we know that in fact the names do hurt, and that our words have tremendous meaning. And so learning the importance of being careful about our words is such a crucial element. There are other reasons to learn Maseches Nedarim, but I'll stick with that one for the moment, given the point that we're trying to make at the moment. So excellent comment about Yiftach. I really think that it highlights that in our Mishnah, we're specifically talking about where the literal reading of the words has something that is incorrect in them. And that is the definition of mistake that we are currently going by. So Beit Shammai Omer Hektish. So now our Gemara picks up and wonders, why is it that Beit Shammai says that we're saying that something is hektish? So my time of Beit Shammai, what's the reason? The Yalfina and Tchilas hektish, Misov hektish. Well, we can learn from the initial creation of hektish from something that becomes hektish at the end of the matter, even though it wasn't your intention. And of course, what in the world is that talking about? So thankfully, the rush helps us out here. Top rush. So misof hektish, Tamura kri sof hektish. That when we have the halacha of Tamura, that is called sof hektish. Meaning, what is Tamura? As a reminder, you have an animal that you've already set aside for the Beit HaMikdash for a sacrifice, and now you want to change the animal from animal A to animal B. Well, bad news for you. When you do that change, not only is animal A still hektish, but now you've also sanctified animal B with the same kedusha, and now you have to offer animal B. Assuming we're talking about a sacrifice that you can offer, you're going to have to offer animal B as that same sacrifice. So whether it's an ola or a shlamim, etc., you're going to be, you're going to have to offer it as well. So matamura, and now of course the rush got it because of the next words, but matamura afilu betos, just as obviously when somebody makes that substitution, they are thinking that the substitution is going to move the kedusha from animal A to animal B, but they are mistaken. So as a result, don't you see that there's an error in their thinking? And yet we see that it actually has holiness. Av hektish afilu betos. So too, when somebody makes their initial consecration of an animal or of an object, it will have an effect, even though you've made a mistake. Beit Hillel says no. Hani mili tamura. That's all about tamura, because there, one can understand Beit Hillel is saying that that's talking about a transfer of hektish. You're not actually making a new object hektish. Aval achusi hektish betos lo machtininan. But when you talk about putting kedusha on an animal, that we're not talking about. That's a different case. So Beit Shammai. Well, 1 second. So now we're going to ask, according to Beit Shammai, that 1 second. When we were talking about Tamura, we knew that the Tamura was not nothing you said in your words. We have a Xeris Akasav, meaning the Torah tells us the halacha of Tamura. So, but if you were to add words to your statement of Tamura, we would listen to them, as we'll see in a moment. Beit Shammai. Now, according to Beit Shammai, Ma ilu amar. If I say that animal A should be switched to animal B at noon, well then, would it become tamura in the morning when I made that comment? No, it doesn't become tamura until my comment comes true, meaning until noontime. Well, I said that the animal that leaves my house first will be black. Well, that wasn't true. So just as the statement about the fact that it will happen at noontime doesn't occur until it actually is noontime, so too my statement now about the animal having to be the kind of animal that I said should have to be true. Right, mihavia tamura mihayishaita, would it become tamura at that moment? No. Ella adamati chatza yom hayom. It's only at noon that it would become tamura. So hachinami lechim megalia milsa, until the thing actually happens, and the thing never happened. So clearly, even if you were to use the rationale that we've offered, this first explanation, according to Beit Shammai, well, that doesn't work. It doesn't work because, even Beit Shammai would agree that when it comes to Tamura, we follow the words that the person says. And here you're ignoring the person's words. So, okay, so now that we've set up the question, again, the question is what is the basis for Beit Shammai's perspective in our Mishnah? We tried one answer, we've rejected it, and now we're going to offer two different answers. And these will be the answers that will switch between, are we talking about, when Beit Shammai says that the animal is hektish, are we talking about the white ox that leaves the house first? Or are we talking about the first black ox that eventually leaves the house? Those are the two different positions. We're going to see the second of those positions right now. So Amar Rav Papa Lekachna Marishon. No, this is why what he was saying was first was not a reference to the absolute first, but lekishayetse rishon. But when eventually a black animal comes out, it will be the first one. Now the Gemara wonders, well, 1 second, maybe there was Vaha Shor Shachar Ka'amar. 1 second, he said black ox singular, meaning he wasn't talking about one of his black oxen, the first of my black oxen to come out. He was saying that I have one black ox. When it comes out first, that is what the one I want to have be hektish. So Milo Askina de Lesle Elahai. Aren't we talking about where there's only one black ox? And if, in fact, there's only one black ox, it doesn't make sense to say my black ox when it is the first to come out, because it's the only one. So either the person should say my black ox, wherever it is, that should be sanctified, or the person is really focusing on the first comment, in which case, even if it's the white ox that comes out, it should be hektish. So no, tzricha de isle train tlasa. No, we're talking about where there are 2 or 3 black oxen. So that's what Rav Papa is talking about. So Rav Papa would say, no, we're talking about that kind of situation. Oh, Beit Hillel Omrim, Beit Hillel would say, Im Kain sheyetse rishon mi ba'ilei. Now the bet here is taken out by the Rush, and the Rush explains. Mark it. The Rush explains, if we take a look at the Rush, it is right opposite the first of the widest lines in the Mefarish, just below the end of the Tosos. And we say, Halki Garcinan, Ubeit Hillel, Im Kain Shiyotze Rishon Mi Baile. According to Beit Hillel, the person should have said the first one that comes out. About Amar Mi Beiti. The fact that the person says that the object is coming out of my house, mashma im shor shachar yatsa min habaya tchila. It implies that I'm talking about only if the first one out of my house is black. I'm not saying the first one to come out. I'm saying the first one out of my house if it is black. That's really how Beis Hillel is understanding. And so as a result, because he's made a mistake, because the first one out of his house is not in fact black, so as a result, nothing becomes hektish according to Beit Hillel. So Amarle Rava mid Barnesh le Rav Ashi. So Rava of Barnesh asks to Rav Ashi about Rav Papa's interpretation. So again, in Rav Papa's interpretation is that first means whenever the first black ox comes out, that's the one that's going to be hektish. So hi hektish betozu, is that really any kind of mistake? There's no mistake. The guy said, as we understand his comment, he said the first black ox, when it comes out of my house, that one will be hektish, is essentially what we're understanding. Hektish b'chavanahu. This is not a mistake in hektish. This is intentional hektish. How come we're calling it a mistake? So mishum da'ache l'dibure kama. No, because we could have interpreted his literal wording of his initial statement as meaning something different, namely meaning only if the first animal out of my house is black, and yet we're interpreting it as in a different manner. So as a result, we're going to call it like a mistake. But is it really a mistake? No, not really. So Savri Beit Shammai, hektish betaos, low heavy hektish. 1 second. Well, the implication of that is that you're telling me that really Beit Shammai do not hold that that if you make a mistake in your hektish, a hektish betaos is going to be hektish. Rather, they say hektish betaos is not a hektish. If a hektish with a mistake is not a hektish. But 1 second, Bahatanan, in the Mishnah that we're going to open with tomorrow, at the end, which is at the end of Lamed Aleph Amabet, Misha Nader ben Nazir, if somebody swears to be a Nazir, v'nisha l'chachamim v'hitiru, and then he asks the rabbis to release his vow, v'haisalo v'hemem v'reshes, and he has an animal that has been set aside, we say and of course, and the rabbi does release the vow, meaning that he is now free and he's no longer a nazir. Teitze v'tireh, but either the flock can go out, the sheep can go out and graze with its flock, and so as a result, Amru Beit Hillel Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, "Iatem modim shehektish betosu." If you're the one, if you agree with us that this is in fact a mistaken hektish, and you say that it allows that the animal can go out and graze with the flock, why don't you say that more generally? That you should agree with us that hektish betos lav havi hektish. Well, what is the implication of that? Miklal de savri beis Shammai hektish betos havi hektish. Isn't the implication of Beit Hillel's question clearly Beit Hillel believes that Beit Shammai must hold that a mistaken hektish is hektish. So Ella Beit Hillel hu de katau. No, so we can say that it's Beit Hillel that made a mistake. That in fact, really Beit Shammai does not hold that a mistaken hektish, notwithstanding the literal words of our Mishnah. Again, our Mishnah began with the words that said Beit Shammai omer hektish tos hektish. But notwithstanding that, really, again, according to Rav Papa's understanding, we don't have to say that we're talking about a real hektish toes here. It's hektish toes only in the sense that our initial understanding of the person's words is being switched around. So Sabri Tamayu the Beit Sham, they thought Beis Hillel thought Sabri Tamayu the Beit Shammai Mishum de hektish betos havi hektish. They thought that a mistaken hektish was hektish, but it turned out the Amri lahom Beit Shammai, and Beit Shammai says back to them, no, la mishum hektish betosu. That case is not in fact a mistaken hektish case. We're just changing his original statement. And so as a result, that's really what we're talking about. But one second. So now we're going to ask again, is it really true that in fact Beit Shammai does not hold of does not say that hektish betos is hektish? Meaning, or put the other way, the Savri Beit Shammai hektish betos lo havi hektish. Are you really saying that Beit Shammai says that a mistaken hektish is not hektish? Tashma. Once again, the last case of our Mishnah is a remarkable case, and we're going to learn it today because we're going to quote most of the Mishnah right now, or maybe the entire Mishnah, and we're going to then see it, God willing. I think we'll see it tomorrow. Yeah, but hopefully we'll see it tomorrow at the end of the day tomorrow. So let's take a look. So actually, maybe we won't see it. Maybe I'll leave it for Shabbos because Daf Lamed Gimel is very, very short. So I'll give a little bit of extra stuff for Shabbos. Okay, but in any event, the point is Tashma. What does the Mishnah say? You got a bunch of people walking on the road. So we're going to say that we'll see that there are 6 people walking on the road, and somebody's walking towards them. So there are actually 7 people walking on the road. The echad ba connect them. Again, 6 people walking in one direction. They're all part of the same group, and one person is walking towards them. And so one of the 6 guys says the following: Hareini Nazir Shezeh Ploni. Wow, that guy looks so much like John Doe. If it's John Doe, I am going to be a Nazir. Ve'echad Amar Hareini Nazir She'ein Zeh Ploni. Give me a break. That guy looks nothing like John Doe. And so as a result, if he's not John Doe, I'm gonna no, I'm sorry. It's the opposite. He's probably saying, no, that guy isn't just look like John Doe. It is John Doe. And so if that's not John Doe, I am going to be a Nazir. So now that's what the first 2 guys say. And so the third guy says, Hareini Nazir she'echad mikem Nazir. Well, I am going to be a Nazir as long as one of you is a Nazir. So, that guy clearly is going to be a Nazir pretty much no matter what. She'ein echad mikem Nazir. And then the next guy says, I am going to be a Nazir if one of you is not a Nazir. So, okay, may not be necessarily the biggest chiddush at the moment, although we'll see what the story is there. And then the next person says, Sheshnechem Nazirim. I'm going to be a Nazir if both of you are a Nazir. And the sixth guy says, Shekulchem Nazirim. And I'm going to be a Nazir only if every one of the five of you is a Nazir. And what does Beit Shammai say? Beit Shammai Omrim, Kulam Nazirim. Every single one of them is a Nazir. And so, Hektish B'tozu. Clearly, there's got to be a Hektish B'toz here, because or a Nazirus B'toz. And again, clearly the Gemara is connecting Hektish and Nazir root here, as we have seen before in Maseches Nedarim. In general, Hektish and Neder are very tied together. The Ketani Kulam Nazir, and yet, despite the fact that clearly people are making mistakes here, it is every single one of them is a Nazir. So, how in the world could Rav Papa's explanation of our Mishnah not involve an actual mistake? So, Amri Sabri Beit Shammai Hektish B'Tos Habi Hektish. So, yes, in fact, the Beit Shammai does believe that if you make a mistake in Hektish, it is Hektish. However, Hachalo, in our Mishnah, as Rav Papa understands it, it is not truly a case in our Mishnah of a mistake in Hektish. Needless to say that, so what's Rav Papa's opinion? Rav Papa's opinion is that when the person says the first black animal, which comes out of, the black animal, the black ox, which will be the first one that comes out of my house, will be Hektish. When the person says that, even though the literal meaning is only if the black animal is the first one out of my house, we are going to understand it as meaning the first black animal that comes out of my house will be Hektish. So that is the interpretation we're going to give it. And Beit Shammai says we're going to give it that interpretation. Beit Hillel says we're not going to give it that interpretation. And as a result, it's not going to be Hektish. And that's the machlokas that our Mishnah is all about. And again, according to this understanding of the machlokas, which animal will be the one that is in fact Hektish? It will be the black animal that eventually comes out. So that is explanation number one. Now Abaye. Abaye is much shorter, but very interesting interpretation. So Abaye Amar Lo Kasalka Dekaim Tzafra. We're not talking about the guy speaking in the morning before the animals have come out of the house. Now, of course, before the animals kind of come out of the house is implied by saying it's the morning. Doesn't actually, the words don't actually mean that. Ella Hacha B'mayaskin. Here's what we're talking about. He's talking about in the afternoon. Again, impliedly that we're talking about after the animal's house left his house. V'amar, and what did the guy say? Shor shachor sheyatza mibesi rishon lehevi hektish. What he really was saying is the black ox, which came out of my house already and was the first one out. That one should be sacred. That one should be hektish. And then people said to him, listen, buddy, just so you know, the white ox was the one that left your house first. And he's like, oh, the white ox was the one that left my house first? And he says to them, if I had known it was the white one, I wouldn't have said black. I would have just said the first one, because that's the one that I really meant. And so now we understand. Right? We can understand what's going on. So what happens is he really means the first one. But, and so as a result, even though it turns out that the first one was white and what left his mouth was black, Beit Shammai says that we're going to say that is fine. It's clear that what he has told us what he meant. He meant the first animal, and even though it doesn't match what he said, we're going to say that's a hektish toes, and it is hektish. On the other hand, Beit Hillel says no, of course not. Yes, it might be post facto that he said that he would have intended to say white, or he would have intended to leave the color out, but he did not leave the color out. And what he said is not in fact true. And as a result, since it's not true, he is not going to have made anything hektish. So that is the understanding of the machlokes that Abaye gives it. Now the problem is, can you really say that we're talking about in the afternoon, meaning after everything has happened? Listen to the language. V'hakatani, especially when it will take the second case, right? So we've reread the first case, but listen to the second case. In our Mishnah said, V'hakatani dinar shel zahav sheya'aleh. That's going into the future. That will come up. It is not about the past. So Tanei she'allah. Okay. So again, according to Abaye's read, let's refer to it as the one that came up. So, well, 1 second. Same problem with the third case. Chavis shel yayin shita aleh. A barrel of wine that will come up. Tanisha also. Okay, so move the tough around and say that it means that it came up. So again, so now we understand the problem with we understand what the problem with the two readings are, right? The problem with the reading that was given to us by Rav Papa is the fact that that it's not a mistake any longer. So how, what are we talking about? And the problem with the Abaye's reading is, in order to make the reading work, you need to say that we're talking about the past. And our Mishnah clearly is using the language of future. So those are the issues with the two approaches. Okay, so now that we've got these two approaches, we're going to now use Abaye's approach to question Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda said something. I mentioned as we started that we had this question about the value of a black oxen versus white oxen. So let's take a look and see what Rav Chisda says. So Amar Rav Chisda, Uchma bechivra lakya, that a black in a white is going to lower value, and chivra b'uchma lakya, black in white is going to reduce the value. So that's the literal wording. It's a very interesting wording. And so, but what does it mean? So thankfully, the Rush helps us understand. And so if we take a look in the middle of wide lines, not the widest lines, not the narrow lines, but the fourth of the middle wide lines, it says, so Migra Otam, that the implication is we're talking about oxen. So if you have a black ox in the middle of a group of white oxen, it is going to make them less valuable. The nimkarim b'pachot, and so it will sell for less. Because the black ox is worth less than the white ox, and so that's going to be a problem. So, and chivra b'ukma lukusa, and what about the black in the white? What is that referring to? Kesem lavan shenimtza b'shor shchor. If you have a white spot, a skin spot, which is understood as some kind of skin disease on a black animal, that will also result in a lower value. So basically, he's making two different points. One, that it seems that white oxen are worth more. And the second is that you need to be careful not to buy any animals with skin diseases. So Tanan, now 1 second, this all implied that black oxen are worth less than white oxen. Well, 1 second, is that really true? Because what about our Mishnah, right? Tanan, shachor sheyetz, and specifically according to Abaye, because according to Abaye, the person intended to sanctify a black animal. The white animal was what came out first, and so as a result, and he says, no, actually, I meant a white animal. And Beit Shammai says that it's hektish. So even though it's more valuable than the animal that he literally said, so it's going to say that it's hektish. So again, so what did our Mishnah say? Shachor sheyetzim beiti rishon hektish. So kasalka daitin ki makdish ba'ayin ra makdish. But I would have thought when one sanctifies something only in the most limited fashion, with a with a stingy eye, so to speak, that they're not going to try and be generous. So that if, in fact, what comes out is actually a more generous gift, I would think that it should not be considered hektish. And yet, Va'amri Beit Shammai Havi hektish. Beit Shammai says that, in fact, it is hektish. Ve'elamai Ba'ayin Yafim hektish. So what's the implication of this? The implication of this is that one gives very generously to the Beit HaMikdash. And yet, let's take a look at the next case. The next case, dinar shel zahav sheyala biyadi rishon. If you have a gold coin that comes out first, va'ala kesef, and the silver coin came up. So Beit Shammai omrim hektish, and again Beit Shammai says that it's hektish. Well, what's that situation? That situation is clearly an ayin ra, because everybody knows that silver is worth less than gold. So the elamai ba'ayin ra maktish. Well, that says that we're going to be giving stingily. So now, 1 second, but then we have the last case. Chavis shel yain shetale biyadi rishon v'ala shel shemen. So I first said that it's going to be the wine, and then it came out that it's oil. Beit Shammai omrim hektish v'hashemen adav miyayin. Oil is generally that more valuable than wine. So we really have an issue. We have the first case is ayin yafa, the second case is ayin ra, and the third case is ayin yafa. So make up your mind, Mishnah. And make up your mind, Abaye slash Rav Chisda, meaning Rav Chisda, how can you understand this Mishnah as Abaye understands it? You're creating a tremendous confusion. So imishum ha lo kasha. Now, if with respect to the last case about the value of oil and wine, don't worry about that. Because Begalil Shanu, we could talk about in the Galil. And in the Galil, Dechamra Adif Mimishka, there wine is more valuable than oil. It's interesting because I think of the Galil as where the wine is produced. And as a result, I would have thought that there's more wine and therefore it's less valuable. But here clearly there's the note here actually notes that actually olive trees are very abundant in the Galil. And so as a result, even though there probably is more wine in the Galil, the olive trees are so much more abundant. So as a result, it's going to be less expensive than wine. So all right, so now we've addressed the last situation. So we can say that the last situation is talking about the Galil. And so as a result, we're saying ayin, that people do give with an ayin ra. And again, our second case is fine because that's consistent with the ayin ra case. Again, because if you say gold and it comes out silver, that's going to be a lesser value. So that's fine for Beit Shammai. But now Reisha Kashila Rav Chisda, we still have a problem with the first case, namely when the person said that a black ox is coming out, and then in the end the white ox came out, and Abaye says that that's the one that gets consecrated. How could Rav Chisda say that the white ox is valued more? That would imply that people give to hektish with an ayin with an ayin tov, with a ayin yafa, and yet that it seems like that should not be the case, especially given the last two cases of the Mishnah. So Amar Rav Chisda will explain, no, ki amri besora de karmanai, that when I was talking about oxen from Carmen. And so as a result, in that situation, that's where I'm going to, where black oxen are going to be worth less than white oxen. But more generally, the black oxen are actually worth more than white oxen. And so, or at least the same as white oxen. So for Amar Rav Chisda, Uchma, and now we're going to have another statement of Rav Chisda. And so as a result, that results in the same conclusion about the oxen in Carmen being different. For Amar Rav Chisda, Uchma lamashke. We have the following statement that when it comes to a black ox, that's going to be good for its skin. Stumka, a red ox, levisre, that's going to be really good for its meat. Chivra leraja, when it comes to a white ox, it's good for plowing. Well, 1 second, V'amar Rav Chisda uchma b'chivra lakya. Well, 1 second. I thought a black ox among white ox is going to reduce the value. And if we take a look at the Mefarish, where Rashi is, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up. It's right above where it says Mishnah in the Rashi. So v'ha'amar Rav Chisda ukma b'chivra lakya demashma bein lemashcha bein leraja havi ukma gerua. The implication of ukma, of a black ox being valued less than a white ox, was it seemed like Rav Chisda's statement was across the board, meaning it didn't make a difference what your flock was set aside for, whether your flock was set aside for skin or for plowing or for food, whatever it is. The implication of Rav Chisda's initial statement is that white oxen are valued more. But that's not true. He just said that black oxen are more useful for their skin. So ki amri batra de karmenu, that again, when ki amre the Torah de karmenu, so that when I said my statement referring to the oxen, I'm talking about the oxen of Carmen. And so as a result, my initial statement is true, but it's a narrow statement. It is not applied generally. And so the end result is that bottom line is that sometimes white oxen are going to be more valuable than black oxen, and sometimes black oxen are going to be more valuable than white oxen. And it depends on what you need it for. Depending on the specific needs, that will determine the situation. So that and again, in our Mishnah, we've had 2 different interpretations of Beit Shammai about the nature of the mistake. According to Rav Papa, it's not really a mistake. It's just we're changing the implications of his initial wording. And so his initial wording was, it sounded like he was saying that it should be the black ox which comes out first, and only if it comes out first. And no, we're going to understand it about the black ox that comes out first, and assuming we're talking about where there's more than one black ox. So that's the way Rav Papa will understand it. And Abaye says, no, we're not talking about it in a forward-looking way. We're talking about it in a backward-looking way, where the person then says, oh, I didn't realize it was a white ox that came out. Obviously, I made a mistake, but I intended that the white ox should also be Kodesh. And so as a result, according to Abaye, Beit Shammai would say that the white ox is going to be holy. So, all right. So that gave us the story for today. And again, tomorrow we're going to talk about the person who becomes a Nazir, thinks that they are about to get out of it, and so but made one of their animals holy. And we saw this in the Tosos that we began today with. That's where we're going to begin tomorrow, and we saw it actually during the course of our Gemara as well. So we've now seen the Mishnah that we're going to learn as the start tomorrow, at least part of the Mishnah, twice, and God willing, we'll start with that. And what we didn't hear today, though, is Beit Shammai's response. And so stay tuned for tomorrow's daf in order to hear Beit Shammai's response. And as a hint as to what that response will be, like all Jewish good responses to questions, it will be with a question of their own.
About cattle.
Yes.
The most common breed of cattle in the United States is a black Angus, which is indeed all black.
Interesting. Okay. And
the second most common breed is the Holstein, which is in Europe is called a Frisian, which is the famous cow that is black and white splotches. And it is mostly a dairy cow. The black Angus is a beef cow. The Charolais breed is the most common beef cattle in France, and it is all white.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so we have this may be, and the black Angus is originally from Scotland, so there may be a debate across countries here. Karmani is just a province of Persia.
Oh, okay. Thank you for answering that question. I wasn't sure where that was, and so so that's interesting. So the question was Karmani more like Scotland or more like France?
Yeah, I don't know when selective breeding of cattle came about, and
Well, we know we have the Torah tells us that Yaakov did selected breeding, so at least arguably. So,
yeah, I'm not questioning that, but I'm not sure how common it was. And one of the most famous breeds in the United States, the Texas Longhorn, happened naturally. It was not bred by humans.
really? All right. Well, Stan wants to know what's the difference between a steer and a cow. Is that just gender?
Well, a cow usually refers to a female, and a steer is a castrated male.
Castrated male. Okay, so that's the difference.
Yeah. So one of the things about the Black Angus and the Holstein is that they were both they were bred not just for their production, but they are also both famous for their docility.
Okay.
And having grown up around Holstein dairy farms, they really are not very aggressive.
Well, that's good. That's safe.
Yeah, it
safer
makes them
for
easier
human
to
beings.
manage.
Yeah.
Steer also be milk producing?
No, I think
No,
there's
steers
it's
are
male. It's male. Males don't.
There's no steers that are female? Or it's
I
just
think-
castrated males?
It's a castrated male, yeah.
Yeah, so there would be no female. So,
Gotcha.
all right, we got a lot
Thank you
covered,
again.
including a little bit of cattle background. Have a wonderful day. Look forward to continuing our learning.
Thank you. Always interesting, and it gets more interesting.
Baruch Hashem.